seems to me with all these protective measures and all these advances that we've had, instead of us feeling safer, it's just made us more afraid, more hypersensitive to the risks that are in life. So could the same be said about how we are living for Christ? We have more technology than we've ever had. We have more tools available to us to minister to other people. Social media and all these things. We have so much more available to us and resources, but it seems to me that instead of doing more with that, a lot of us have just become more afraid.
It's blurry. It's okay.
And we don't live for Christ like we really should. So why is it, from what I can see, that more Christians don't serve? Why? Because they're afraid it might not be safe? And I'm talking to myself here too, because I'm petrified, scared to death about this trip we're about to take. But we're going to do it afraid. But I can't tell you how many people that come up to us, and I don't mean this bad, but it's just the reality. I don't know how many people come to us and say, Randy, I'd really like to help y'all, but I don't have this skill. I don't have that. Do you really think they could use somebody like me? Or I'm too young to do that, or I'm too old. People are afraid to serve because it might not be safe. Why don't more Christians dream big dreams anymore? How many of you don't have to raise your hands, but how many of you have dreamed of something big you think God's put on your heart to do, and because you've been afraid, it's still tucked away in your heart and you've kept it in your mind and heart? You're like, if I share that with somebody and it don't work out, they'll think I'm crazy. Or do you think I'm not concerned about if things don't go well at this school? My flesh is telling me, Randy, they're not going to say anything bad about anybody but you. They're going to say, Randy, you should have never chose that. You knew that was a mistake. You knew that was too big of a project. Why don't more Christians share their faith with others? Are we afraid to offend somebody? Are we afraid we might upset somebody, so we play it safe? Why don't Christians take a stand anymore? We have listen, and I'm talking to me too. We have let them take prayer out of schools. We have let them take our Christian faith away. And I'm telling you, if we don't get up and take a stand, it's all going to be gone. If we don't stand up and stop being afraid, pastor's going to have a hard time being able to even get up here and preach. Now it's coming. If we don't stop being afraid, stop playing it safe, and take a stand. Why don't people tithe? Now most of you in here, maybe you do, but I know from what I hear that it's a very low number of people on average across America that attend church that actually tithe. Are you afraid that you can't pay your bills? At one time, that was me.
Stop it.
But today, can I tell you, I'd be afraid I couldn't pay my bills if I didn't tithe.
You can't.
So stop playing it safe.
Stop it, Beverly.
So more Christians, it seems to me, don't break habits, don't take risks, don't build relationships, or have adventures anymore because it might not be safe.
I'm just recording it.
So if you refuse to believe that the ultimate goal is to walk up to your grave one day and safely fall over in it, then this message might be for you. If you want something more on your tombstone than the phrase, oh, what a relief. I made it through life, playing it safe, and nothing bad happened. I didn't accomplish anything, but nothing bad happened. I had a guy come to my office a few years ago. He had just retired, lived in Richmond, drove all the way from Richmond to Danville to talk to us about being a part of God's Big Crew. He sat down in front of my desk and said, Randy, I've worked my whole life for the same company, made good money, good benefits, good retirement. I've enjoyed life. We've traveled. We've had fun. He said, when I retired, I realized that when I die, I want something on my tombstone that would say I made a difference. Not that I just made it through life, but that I made a difference. And I know a lot of us, including me, for a long time, we don't do those things because we're afraid of what might happen. But let me tell you, there is a price to pay for playing it safe. Playing it safe limits your impact as a Christian. It leads you down a road to stagnation, to unrealized potential, and unfulfilled dreams. You know, when God called us to do that first mission in Oklahoma, I fought that for days. I was afraid and scared. God put it on our heart to go to Oklahoma, our first trip. And 20 years later, here we're going back to to Oklahoma again. But on that first trip, I knew God put it on my heart to do that. But I kept saying, God, they're so far away. God, I'm just a small business owner. I can't do anything. It took days of him dealing with me for me to finally take that first step. And 5 years in, the thing had grown to a point where somebody was going to have to do it full time. Now, I felt like God was calling me. Well, I didn't feel like, I knew he was. He was calling me to step away from a business I had spent years to build. It was just beginning to pay off. And I kept saying, God, how am I going to put a roof over my family's head? How will I pay my bills if I don't have this business? I fought for 2 years to do that, and finally in 2005, I ain't going to say God puts anything on you, but I became very sick and very ill. For 6 months, I couldn't do much of anything but lay flat on my back. And I finally said, Lord, you get me past this. I'll do what you've called me to do. And I did. August the 1st, 2005, I sold my business. Well, let me rephrase. I almost gave it away. And I stepped out on faith to do what God called me to do. And now I fought it and fought it and fought it. In fact, when I got my calling for sure to go full time, it was so strong, nobody could have denied it. But I still pushed back. You see, back then we had about 10 or 15,000 square foot of warehouse downtown in a little building, no docks, no forklifts. Everything we loaded was loaded by hand back then. I had worked all week long. I'd worked all day at my business. I was tired when I left work. I went to the warehouse to load a truck to drive 7 hours to a place in Tennessee that had been hit by a tornado. And we was down there loading blessing buckets, and I was carrying 2 buckets, one in each hand, across the warehouse, just thinking. I thought, man, I was so miserable at work, so tired. In fact, I've been really miserable at work for quite some time. But I'm walking across there, and I thought, man, I feel a whole lot better, a lot more energy. You know, this is what I want to do. And God, it wasn't an audible voice, but clear as a bell, God spoke to me and said, Randy, it's what I want you to do too. Been trying to tell you that for a long time. And I'm not a lively worshiper. I'm usually the guy that's sitting pretty quiet and ain't no terror. Don't say a lot. But God got on me so strong that day, my knees buckled and I just fell to the floor. And everybody come running. They thought I'd had a heart attack or something, I guess. Everybody's like, Randy, are you okay? The calling was that sure, but I still fought it because I was afraid. But then I finally took that step. August the 1st, I sold my business. We went to do the signing of the business over, and we went into the attorney's office, me, the partner in business I had, and the lady I was selling my part to. We went in, sat down, The attorney looked at me and he said, Randy, as your attorney, before we do this, I need to advise you that I think you're about to make the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life. You've got a good business going, you're giving it away, and you're stepping out on absolutely nothing but thin air. Now, I'm just telling you, I think you're about to make a big mistake and you should reconsider. You think that won't put doubt and fear in your mind? But I said, I appreciate your comments, but I got to do what God's called me to do. And he slid the papers over. I signed them, and he snatched them back across the desk. And he said, I'm done with you. Get out of my office. He was angry because he thought I was making that big a mistake. Sometimes, folks, as Terry often says, you just got to do things afraid. 45 days after I went full time, Hurricane Katrina hit 30 days after. 45 days after, I got a phone call one day from a friend of mine that runs a business in Rocky Mount, Virginia. He said, Randy, God's been dealing with me about something since the first part of August. And he said, I'll be honest with you, I can't afford to do it. But God just will not leave me alone. So here's the deal. I'm going to send you a check for $2,500 a month as long as I can. And I want that to help pay your salary so you can go do what God's called you to do. What if?
You guys need to listen to this.
And I'm not, please don't take this as being boastful, because it's not. I'm petrified every day still. But what if? What if I'd have took that lawyer's advice? I could have very easily got up and said, you know what, you're right. Please, don't play it safe. Because playing it safe also shrinks your faith. I can't find a single verse where Jesus says, follow me, and we'll play it safe. Can you imagine at the Olympics, if the people who do gymnastics, if somebody came out to do a balance beam act and they come out and there's all this excitement beginning to build and you can't wait for the routine, and this person comes out and steps up on the beam and standing real straight and tall, and then all of a sudden they just fall and hug that beam as tight as they can with their arms and legs wrapped around it and kind of scoot across it and jump off. What's that? But we're doing that in our Christian faith. We come to church and get all built up and we're ready to go, and then Monday morning we wrap them arms around something that's safe and comfortable. Faith has to be worked, just like your body and your muscles have to be worked for them to grow. I said earlier, we've built 45 brand new homes now for families who have lost everything in disaster. 10 of those in the last 2.5 years. So you know how safe and comfortable it would have been to go back to Moffett, Oklahoma and rebuild one of those people's homes? We could have come back home saying, oh, we got that. We've done that before. That's no big deal. But he didn't call us to do that. He took it from a 1,200 square foot house to a 30,000 square foot school. I want to talk about stretching your faith, but there was a time when building a house, and I don't want to minimize that, but there was a time when building somebody a house was as terrifying for us as doing this school is. But God uses that and stretches your faith and exercises it so that we can do more. So how should we live for Christ? Well, let's look at a few examples in the Bible for that. Abraham left the familiar. In Genesis 12, the Lord said to Abraham, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to a land that I will show you. He was asking him to leave everything that was safe and comfortable and familiar. Moses went to Pharaoh and said, let my people go. That had to be uncomfortable. Esther put her life in danger to pursue the king. How many here have really put your life in danger to pursue Christ? David took out a giant. In 1 Samuel it said, and all those assembled here will know that it is not by the sword nor the spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. As Philistines stepped forward to attack him, David ran. He ran toward the giant, toward the battle line, reached into his bag, pulled out a stone, and killed that giant. How terrifying could that have been for him? I mean, the greatest of the military people back then was afraid of this giant. David ran towards him. He didn't play it safe. Peter got out of the boat. And not only did he step out of the boat onto the water, I mean, they were just in a bad storm. They said when they saw Jesus walking on the water, they thought it was a ghost and was afraid. And Jesus went to the cross. In Luke, it says, and he withdrew about a stone's throw behind them, where he knelt down to pray, and he said, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Not my will, though, but yours be done. Even Jesus, if I'm reading that right, was afraid of what he was about to have to face. But he said, not my will, but yours be done. All these people faced difficult situations, yet they pushed through their fears and got out of their comfort zone. Playing it safe stunts your growth as a Christian. Christians, a lot of us have stopped asking God, what do you want me to do? And when we do that, we slowly develop a safe, boring faith. Do you, I hope I don't offend anybody here, do you just come to church on Sunday morning and Wednesday night and enjoy the music and the preaching and that's it? Have you developed a faith that you feel safe sitting on the pew and hearing the word and enjoying the music and that's it for you? You remember we talked about Moffat a while ago and I told you that the second time we went out there and I walked through that school and we had already made the commitment, done called all these people and started the whole process, and we went back to do the measurements and start materials list and get more video footage and interviews from them, and we started walking through that school, and I didn't say anything to anybody, but I'm thinking, Randy, you've lost your mind. And to make it worse, when we got back home the next day, I was in a meeting in Chatham, and I left that meeting and I was driving to the warehouse, and my dad lives about 100 miles away. He's 86 years old. So I'm driving down the road, and we had done some TV interviews by this time. So my dad calls and I say, hey Dad, how you doing? Oh, I'm good, son. How are you? I said, I'm great. He got this concern in his voice. He said, son, I saw on TV last night where you're going to go back to Oklahoma and build an entire school. I said, that's the plan, Dad. He got more concern in his voice. He said, son, can you do that? I said, no, Dad, I can't. But I know a man who can. You see, when you take risk, when you step out of your comfort zone and do those things and God comes through, He becomes alive and real to you. And your heart starts on a path of rediscovering faith that is alive, not boring and dead, but alive. And playing it safe shrivels our heart. If you're a follower of Jesus and listening to His voice, Jesus will challenge you. He'll challenge your faith and He'll ask you to do things that seemed impossible. So how many of you here today, and I'm going to raise my hand before anybody else, how many of you here today would be honest with me and say, I remember a time that I know God spoke to me in my spirit and asked me to do something, witness to somebody, pray for somebody, whatever it may be. I knew it. I knew that I knew. I